Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX, along with BDEX's founder and CEO, David Finkelstein. Good to see you, David. What's new?
Hey, Jesse. Good to see you as well. Been busy, been working on a new case study, so I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about that at some point. But we had a client come back and give us some good stats that showed how OmniPixel is working for them. So that's exciting, and hoping to release that in some form of a case study going forward. So
I love that. Yes. Customer voice is so important. We know our audience understands that because they're mostly marketers. But today on Deconstructing Data, we're thrilled to welcome on Nash Bober. He is the head of analytics, AI, and data advisory at BJSS. I'm going to bring him in. Welcome to the show.
Hey, David, Jesse, how's it going?
We're doing great, Nash. Appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely.
We'd love to have you kick it off for us. So why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background about who you are, your experience, what led you to become head of analytics, AI, and data advisory at BJSS, and a little bit about what you guys are doing and anything that might be unique about what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, boy, where do I begin? So I've been about half my career in consulting and half my career in-house, and it really kind of spans the gamut, all the way from, a lot of like the data warehousing, legacy data warehousing, into more like the lakehouse stuff now, through ETL, cleansing the data, all the transformations, and ultimately presenting the data as well. So, as we were kind of talking, a real breadth, not depth, jack of all trades kind of skill set. And ultimately what that's really kind of led me into, I think, is more of the consulting side of things, more on the delivery, solutioning with clients, talking with people, doing a lot of the salesy type stuff. I really enjoy kind of the human element side of data analytics, less so than really kind of being heads down. So kind of found my niche a little bit there. And what kind of brought me to my current situation is honestly what's affected so many people, unfortunately, recently, is I was, the victim of a layoff earlier this year. And, it kind of was one of those things where it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise, right? It was something that allowed me to take a step back, spend some time with my kids, and kind of reevaluate where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And ultimately, through some connections, some people I worked with in former roles, this role at BJSS kind of came to me. And historically, BJSS is a UK company. Software engineering is mostly the focus, but they also have data analytics, AI, governance, those kind of capabilities. And they're looking to expand footprint in the US. So I've got hooked up with some people there, and we're kind of out there now, working on our go-to-market, trying to raise awareness and just ultimately build cool stuff for our clients. So that's kind of the long and short of me.
Really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love those blessings in disguise. And I always go with this mantra, like good, bad, who knows? And so when something happens, you lose your job or whatever it is, I always tell people, don't label it. Don't label it as bad. You don't know. It could be good. Like, who knows? Like, you don't know until you see what the outcome brings. And a lot of times it is, good in the long run, because it creates, a catalyst effect that changes something and enables you to do something else, or, learn something else, or whatever it is. And it always turns out to be better than you think. So
yeah, it was definitely, there used to be a stigma around that, right? It was kind of like a hush hush thing if you ever laid off or something like that. But, unfortunately, it's so commonplace now that there's kind of almost a little community around it. And you can really kind of empower other people and help be that, you're that helping hand to someone who maybe gets an interview or something like that. It just makes a connection. So definitely kind of a light at the end of the tunnel type situation.
That's incredible. And, that is going to move us into our first topic, which is keeping a grip on AI. And I loved what you were saying about this earlier, like AI is awesome. Everyone's still talking about it, right? But do we need all of the AI, and can it get out of control?
Yeah. it's kind of like the double-edged sword, right? Someone who's in analytics and AI, you obviously are kind of promoting and pushing AI and those services, and you're kind of pushing the boundaries of what can really be in the data space. But I also feel like every day you wake up, you see a new news story about fraud or deep fakes or OpenAI had the voice technology, right, where they can kind of mimic anyone's voice, and they say like, hey, this is great for people who are handicapped or can't speak or have lost the ability to speak. But my head, kind of the pessimist in me goes to, well, that also just opens up for anyone and everyone who's a fraudster to steal your voice, call your bank, take all your money, call your grandma, ask for cash. So there's definitely things that we need to, kind of keep the guardrails on and keep it close to the chest. And there's a ton of really good real world applications. I mean, people see it every day with like chat bots. I'm someone who hates to make phone calls. If I have to call somewhere, I'm probably just not going to do it. So if I go to a contact me page or an FAQ and there's like a chat function, I'm set. So things like that are great. Obviously, we see self-driving cars and all these different abilities that are coming around that are really pushing the world, I think, to think differently and be a better place, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, you also run the risk of a lot of things like, biases in your AI. So if you're training systems like facial recognition is a really great example. If you've trained your systems on like white skin or light tones, and all of a sudden now you're using it on dark skinned people, there's going to be biases there. And there's also going to be biases around things like maybe historical data or measurement data, geographic data. So understanding really the whole point of AI is having that clean, consistent data. So, a lot of the things I think when I meet with clients or I think about how to pitch AI to clients is 90% of this is really going to be data engineering. So there's a lot of upfront work to collect that data, collate that data, cleanse that data before you're ultimately able to run it through a model and do something like that. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear that. They're kind of looking for an easy button. We're so accustomed to ChatGPT and Copilot and things now where you just kind of type in something on a keyboard and it comes up and you kind of get your answer. You really don't have to think about it too much. So I think really kind of being aware of, different advances, but also things like, GDPR in a marketing sense, or, CCPA in California. There's so many people who are concerned with privacy and their data and things like that we've got to be really cognizant of that as we're building out these models and things. And then kind of the elephant in the room too is kind of what I, alluded to earlier is like Skynet. People are afraid that, AI is going to become sentient and it's going to take over, or at the very least, it's going to take my job. So I think it's important to kind of keep a human-centric approach when we're thinking about these things. And really, it's not so much about replacing humans or replacing, jobs necessarily, but it's more about how do we augment and enhance menial tasks, things that are just repetitive, to kind of allow people to have easier day jobs and things like that, remove some of that boring stuff and allow for a little more, human thought and creativity. So I see a lot of stuff on the horizon for AI. It's super powerful, but at the same time, we just got to make sure that we're going about it the right way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally, you're totally right. I mean, the reality is we have to look at AI as how can it help improve things for us, improve our processes, improve our day-to-day. But you also made a really good point about ChatGPT. I mean, everybody has played with it and everybody thinks that, okay, well, if I can just do that, and it's as easy as me just asking a question and getting an answer back, why can't I apply something like that to my business? And there's a lot more that goes into it, to your point, right? I mean, if you're building an AI to do something specific in your business, then you have to train it on data about your business, right? Mm-hmm. Where ChatGPT, basically there's a certain margin of error that's allowed, right? Because it's trained on public data, and that data could be wrong or it could be right, and it's gonna do its best to give you an answer based on the data that it has. But in your business, you can't afford to do that, right? I mean, it has to be trained on the proper data. And so that process of, harnessing that data, collaboration between different divisions of the company to decide what data goes into it, and then training it on that data, and then, and then making sure that it's clean. That's the only way to make sure that, your business is not affected by it, right? And so there's a lot more that goes into it than just, there's no easy button, to your point, right?
Yeah. And even to the chat GPTs, the open AIs, the Googles, Meta, whoever's creating these LLMs, large language models, they've got, like you said, infinite resources to collect from, right? I mean, they've got all the training data from the internet. They're just scraping data. B, their funds. So they've got mega crazy data centers, all over the world, where they're able to have this compute power to just churn through these models and things like that. And yeah, for, even a Fortune 500, but I think a little smaller, some small to medium sized businesses who think, how hard could that be? Get some data together and ask it a question, and then let me get my answer back. The answer is really hard. It's really hard, and it gets really expensive. And there's a reason why not every single company in the world, has already implemented AI right now. That's why everyone's talking about it. So yeah, super valid points.
Yeah, and it's also about like trying to figure out, what you want to do with it, right? And what's your goal? What's your end game? What are you trying to accomplish, and how to get there, right? And then that's the whole process itself.
And it leads to another question. Do you really want AI? So I'm sure, like, as you're talking to people, as they're considering these things, it's probably to your benefit in many cases for them to not move that route if they're not really the right target for that. They're in the right space for it. So what would be some of those questions, that you would ask when people are considering, do you really want AI? What is it really going to help you?
Yeah, I think, in consulting, it's very easy to just kind of push services, and, you're looking to sign SOWs and proposals. It's all about, it's a cash business, cash flow. You need money in. But to really be a good partner and form those relationships and become like a trusted advisor, more than just kind of like a body shop. You need to kind of ask them those questions. And I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. It's just, in general, it's like, is this right for your business? What are your goals and your challenges? Are you just seeing your competitor down the street, in Silicon Valley, come up with some chatbot on their website, and you think, hey, we should do chatbots too? Or, are you trying to gather maybe some touch points that you don't have right now? You're not gathering email addresses from people who visited your website or something. And, if you put that in a form somewhere in a chatbot, now you've got that. And that makes sense. But there's really a cost benefit analysis that goes along with that, because you've got things like I was kind of mentioning earlier, to the infrastructure. So, your Azures, your AWSs, Googles, all these cloud platforms are cheap, right? They're cheaper than buying your own hardware and hosting it yourself in an office space. But they're also like usage consumption based. So as you start out, maybe it's not so expensive. Now you're churning through a couple of different models and some really heavy algorithms. And now you look at your, Azure, AWS spend at the end of the month, and you're like, wow, I just let this thing go way too long. It was training for 24 hours on a 16 gig, massively cored VM somewhere, and now I've got to pay that bill. So it's not free. There's compute that's happening. The second part of that, which is kind of where, maybe the consultants come in, but ultimately, you need to maintain in-house, is the talent pool. So, it's not super easy to be a data scientist or an AI specialist and understand statistics and understand the different algorithms, and when you would use, a neural network versus regression modeling versus, you're going to do like some crazy unsupervised deep learning. So, you have to prepare for that too. Are you going to hire a couple in-house AI SMEs and you're going to be able to maintain this? Or are you going to be hooked up to a consultant, forever, and you're paying those hourly rates? So things like that that are really important. And then also goes along with that is just the change management. So now, okay, I built you a model. You've got this extract, or you've got this API endpoint. now what? How do you implement that into your workflow so your business is actually getting the value out of seeing all of this data? So there's just some of those little checkpoints, you really kind of want to go through with them to make sure that it's something that's going to be valuable.
Yeah, to your point, every once in a while I'll get a Slack message from my CTO, and he'll be like, you're going to see a little additional usage from today. We were whatever, we were retraining something, or we were ingesting a bunch of data, and it's like, yeah, you can see when those spikes happen, and the bigger the organization, the more you got to keep tabs on those things.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always tough too when it's hooked up to a credit card, right? It's just like in your personal life. It's so easy to be somewhere and just swipe because you don't see the physical exchange of money. And yeah, you think I'm gonna bump this VM up, to a beefier size so I can, churn this a little faster, or ingest, a couple more million rows a little faster. And then you get the bill at the end of the month and you're on the phone with someone like, what are you doing? This isn't in the budget. So yeah, tons of concessions there.
Yeah, that should really be one of the things you're considering when you're thinking, do you really want AI?
Yep.
So like for those who it would be good for in most instances, I mean, you can use AI for so many things, so I guess maybe we should specify but like who is a right fit for it? And like, are there any small businesses who you would say would be the right fit for, I guess we're talking about custom APIs, or not APIs, but AIs.
Yeah, I think, anyone, I guess to kind of broad stroke it, anyone would be a fit who's got their expectations in line and is wanting to start small. So, what I kind of mean by that is, that if at the end of the day, someone develops this model for you, or, you develop your own Gen AI, models or something like that, your business isn't going to quadruple overnight, or you're not going to close this merger and acquisition, or, whatever your business goal ends up being. AI is just kind of like some ornaments on the Christmas tree. It's going to help you get there. It's going to help you see insights maybe you didn't see before. Maybe it does do some cost savings because you can automate a couple things, but it's definitely not a silver bullet. It's just something else kind of in the tool belt to use. And then also with starting small, it's just doing some basic regression. Let's try to do some prediction things. Maybe we can say based on in marketing, this is a great way to look at, like customer retention, or who should we be targeting, demographic information and stuff like that. Who's going to buy our product based on, age and geography, and you can kind of predict those things. So those aren't things that are going to cost a whole lot of money, doesn't take a whole lot of crazy data. And also it's not going to make or break your business if you kind of decide to go whole hog on this model and it flames out or something like that. It might have helped your sales team or your marketing team target better, but it's not something where you kind of bet the farm on, and now all of a sudden you're like scrambling because you're not going to hit quotas or something like that. So it's really just being, like how I'm in my life. I'm definitely not an early adopter to anything. I'm pretty skeptical. So just keeping a healthy kind of skepticism towards it, and it's fine to dip your toes in, but just really understanding kind of those implications, again, around costs, maintainability, everything like that.
In data.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And there are some simple, ways to really get started. I mean, if you have, I'll just take it similar to your example. Like if you have some customer data, you're looking at your customers that have purchased whatever certain products from you or whatever it is, there are ways that you can literally just take that data literally right out of your CRM. If you have the data about sort of who they are and you have some basic information about them, and things that they purchased, there are some pretty good tools out there where you can literally just upload all of that data and say, hey, just tell me what the commonalities are about these people. And you can probably get some good insights that way as well, just to get you started.
Yeah. And there's been such a move towards like democratizing, data in general, but also AI, where, there's a lot of tools you buy right off the shelf, and you can kind of, like you said, you plug in some of your own data and it crunches it and it does everything for you, and it just gives you your outcome. So it's not always, I think a lot of people think, it's, you got to be like a Python expert, kind of heads down, really in the numbers, in the math. And, if you are that kind of person, yeah, you can do some really cool, custom, great stuff. But if you're someone who doesn't have that talent on your team or doesn't have the time or whatever it might be, Azure's got AutoML, Google's got Vertex AI. There's Data IQ out there. There's all these different third-party softwares that kind of make their money on being like a, simple person's AI toolkit. So yeah, there's definitely low barriers of entry to get there. It's just a matter of, that cost benefit analysis once again.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, data and AI culture. So, as you're weighing that cost benefit analysis, that is really, we talk about data culture a lot. We've never really talked about AI culture. So could you kick us off on AI culture and what comes to mind for you when we talk about this?
Yeah. I think they're not so dissimilar. Data and AI to me, they're hand in hand. It's the same thing. It's just kind of a discipline. But when I think of AI culture, it's really, how do you empower people to use it? Even in your own organization, how do you kind of, again, democratize it so that everybody's kind of able to pick it up and understand it at some level? But also, understanding that it's supposed to help you. It's not supposed to hurt you. So, we've got our co-pilots, our chat GPTs. Maybe you're running some code or some SQL or something through there to help with syntax or formatting or something. So it's not all bad. It's just about educating people on how to use it, when to use it. In the case of, us as a consultant, we don't need any customer data, any client information we don't want on our own machines, right? We don't want to run any of that stuff through AI. We don't want to be responsible for any kind of data leaks or anything like that. So it's also driving home that responsibility and making sure people really understand the implications of what this is, because it's easy to open up Copilot or ChatGPT and you kind of think you're just throwing, information to the void. You're just throwing it out to this black box. You're not really sure what's happening to it. But it's out there somewhere now. And I've even seen some of these things on LinkedIn recently where I think there's like a new privacy setting or something where they're saying that they basically can take anything you posted on LinkedIn and, use it to train their AIs and things like that. So people are concerned with that kind of stuff. So just education, ultimately, at the end of the day, is just make sure people are aware of these implications of what AI is actually going to do. So
now LinkedIn's listening to us too?
I think so. I think at this point, your data's out there, unfortunately. In one data breach or another, like all your stuff's out there at this point. So I try to just, stop the bleeding, but I'm like, there's probably someone stole my identity a couple of times already. So I'm like, it'll be okay.
I literally went online today because I got a letter in the mail from some healthcare company that I've never heard of that my data's been breached, social security numbers and everything. And it's like, so I spent the day, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, credit lock or whatever they call it, freeze. On all of them. So it's just crazy. And the one thing that's curious to me is like what you said, like if you're taking data and let's say you're gonna ask ChatGPT to do something with it or whatever it is, some tool, Copilot, whatever it is, it's consuming that data and then it's going to do something with it. But to your point, like what happens after that? Like, do we even know? I don't know. I mean, I've never read their terms or anything like that. Maybe I have no idea. Like what happens to any information that you're giving, putting into these platforms? Are they consuming that and holding on to it and using it again in the future for something, or does it get wiped out afterwards?
I
don't know.
I've never definitely read. I'm definitely one of those people who just click agree when it comes to terms of service and privacy policies. But I know we pressed Microsoft. We had a client who was really concerned that their data was being stored with Microsoft, and they were like, "No, we don't. Like, we don't know anything about that. We don't store anything. It's all your data. We just happen to be kind of like the platform, so to speak, the compute power behind everything." So, I have no reason to suspect they would be lying about that. But then again, you see news stories all the time of, such and such had their data breached, and you're like, why would they even have that data? I don't know. So who knows?
Yeah, that's wild. So speaking of data and AI culture, what do you think teams need to be doing to make sure that, AI isn't making a problem even bigger? Because sounds like a lot of these larger companies who can afford to be doing all this maybe shouldn't need to clean up their data and get it more secure.
Yeah, it's tough because my first reaction would just be common sense. I just kind of think like, does this seem real? Is this a scam? But you see these news stories, you log on to Facebook, you see people's parents and grandparents getting fooled all the time by these deep fakes and things like that. So I think just continuous monitoring and training, trying to stay on top of it, trying to understand the trends, in a good and bad way. So what are the new technologies coming out? What are the new capabilities? But then also, how can that be used, against you? How can they be used for evil? It's definitely changing the way things are. When we were all in school, we didn't have these fancy AI things to help us write a term paper or take a test or something like that. And now that's readily available for kids to help them do their homework and things like that. And is that cheating? Is it plagiarism? I don't know. I don't know if anyone can really say until a lot of these, organizations and governing bodies and things really put some kind of like laws and things around this. I know we've got like the ISO has some standards out there for AI and different things like that. But I just think the technology is moving way faster than policy and regulations can kind of come up with and create and stop. So I think it's up to good guys with AI can stop bad guys with AI, right? So it's going to be this like eternal battle where they're just trying to figure out how we can have like ethical hackers and things like that, but like an ethical AI type version of that to kind of combat the bad guys. But yeah, it's scary. I see a lot of things out there. I wonder. I have a lot of conversations, and I think about my kids down the line when they go to school and stuff like that. I'm like, what would even what degree do I tell them to chase? What kind of education will be important years down the line? How far does technology and AI progress to really kind of remove the need for certain, schools of thought and things like that? So I'm probably as in the dark as a lot of other people, even though I kind of live it, daily. But it's exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. To me, the scary part is what you mentioned earlier. The whole idea of deep fakes, whether it be, voices or pictures or whatever it is. It's becoming way too easy to create something that looks 100% real that is completely fake, and that's kind of scary, right? Because you can create anybody, any person in any scenario you want, and today it's probably, pretty easy to figure out that it's not real because it's not, quite there. It's not perfect yet. But how long is it going to be? A year until it is, good enough that you won't be able to tell from looking at it? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is crazy. And you mentioned earlier too about, kids and should they use AI in school? And I don't know the right answer there, but I will say I have checked my daughter's homework using ChatGPT. Those word problems where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like 4th grade gifted math. And I'm like, I can't do it. It's like, I need a spreadsheet and I need like 1,000 rows to figure this out. But I know there's some silly trick that I'm just missing. And ChatGPT always helps me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the answer is about education and AI culture in a larger view in terms of society, but AI culture in businesses. I sort of feel like as you were talking, maybe these businesses and the AI culture they need to create is sort of not policing, but like kind of they need to like be watching the data not only to make sure it's clean and to make sure that we're not garbage in, garbage out, something bad doesn't happen, but also so we can maybe avoid some of these leaks if possible and keep an eye open for different holes there. But anything else on data and AI culture that either of you want to add?
I think going on what you were just saying, Jesse, I think there will be actually a real business, sort of sector behind using AI to validate it, is something real or not. I think that there's a potential entire sector of business there, because if you can create something that can detect whether something is real or not, was this created by AI? And then I think there's a ton of value there. That's your next business.
But then we get to the paradox of now you're using AI to tell if something else is AI or not. And, like, is it going to snitch on itself? Is it becoming aware? Like, so yeah, it's interesting for sure. We have that same that problem where we think about, hey, we need to come up with some mock data. Well, do we have AI create some synthetic data for us? And then, like, I don't even know if this data is right or whatever. Or I've sent AI some like Power BI DAX and been like, hey, help me with this DAX. And it'll tell me to do something. And I'm like, you can't do this in Power BI though. And I'll say it to it and I'm like, you're right. I lied. You can't do that. So if you're someone who takes it at face value, yeah, there's gonna be issues. But like you said, healthy skepticism, just double check everything that it puts out there before you start going to production with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've actually used both Claude and Perplexity to write some code. And when you tell it to write code and it comes back and then you execute the code and it doesn't work, and you go back and say, hey, this didn't work. Like I got an error on this line. It'll come back and say, oh, sorry about that. You're right. I see what I did. And it'll, create a fix for it. But it's pretty funny.
Yes. I experience the same thing with content. I'll say, write a 4,000 character post for TikTok and it'll come back and it'll be like 4,900 characters. And I'm like, this won't post. And I'm like, how long was that? Can you please make it 4,000? And it'll like calculate. But also like I'll ask ChatGPT to act as a, say, TikTok expert and help me write, because I sell products on TikTok. Just like get into these random brand deals. I'm doing like some beauty lotions right now. And I'll be like, help me like write a script that I can read as I'm making this video. And it writes the script. And then I get penalized on TikTok because what I said was like making some health claim or something. And I'm like, TikTok's definitely not or ChatGPT is definitely not a TikTok expert. So you're right. And that you have to check the work for sure. But anyway, anything else on data and AI culture? Otherwise, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack, Nash?
So I'm going to give a super political answer and say the best tech stack is the one that can do the job. So that's my political answer. But, I think if I had to choose, so if I start real basic, if I'm going to be writing some code or something like that, I'm a pretty basic guy. I like Notepad++, maybe VS Code to do some of my own development there. I like Google's cloud platform only because I just really like Google products. I think that they've got just a clean UI, UX. It just makes sense. It's just very easy to navigate around in. We do, so at BJSS, we're Azure and AWS partners. So I've actually been working a lot in the Azure stack lately and getting really comfortable with that. And that's great. There's a ton of companies out there who are like they use Microsoft Teams, Office 365, that whole thing. So if you're a Microsoft shop and you already got, half of it, kind of tacking on Fabric or Synapse and Power BI and all of those things, it's super simple to do. And that makes a lot of sense too. I have to say I am an iOS guy on my phone. I was just ribbing a friend of mine because I was texting and their texts are green because it's Android. So I will say I'm Apple there, but I'm a Windows person when it comes to my machine. So tasks she uses, my wife likes her Mac. I can't figure it out, and I'm a tech guy. Like I get on there and I don't know any of my hotkeys. I don't know where anything's at. I can't navigate. I'm like a baby. So I stay pretty basic with my Windows machine. But other than that, honestly, I love, and this is probably just the tech guy in me too, right? But I love the opportunity to learn new stuff, touch new tools, try new things. Only because just to understand the competitive landscape, right? So if you're really into one tool, that's awesome. But how do I recommend that without being able to say the pros and the cons? Because I've used some of the competitors. So anything I can get my hands on, I definitely want to try.
For sure. Definitely. Well, I've heard a lot of those mentioned, but I didn't know some of the ones in the beginning, especially the ones you said wrote code.
Oh yeah. Well, Jesse, you got to spend
Yeah,
more time with
never
David
heard of that
and the tech guys so you can start writing some code and doing some stuff. David, what's your favorite, what do you like to write code in? What's your favorite IDE?
You know, I don't even write code anymore. So for me, it was actually just something. I don't even know. Like, there's this scripting technology called PineScript in a trading application called TradingView, and so I was writing a script for tracking stocks. So that's
Nice.
what it was.
Okay.
But what's cool about it is, like, I saw, like, okay, in order to do this, you have to know PineScript. I'm like, crap, I can sit here and learn PineScript. Maybe I'll see if, and I was literally like, maybe I'll see if AI knows it. Yeah, it does. So I literally was able to just say, okay, well, and explain exactly what I want written, and it wrote it for me. So it was like pretty impressive.
Yeah. See, those are
with a little trial and error, a couple of errors there, but it does work. So it's cool.
Nice. Awesome.
But my coding days are long gone. I haven't coded since probably, let's see, probably since like 2008.
That's not true. I remember when I was working on the website one time and I couldn't figure something out, and you're like, "Oh, just pull up the code." And I'm like, "Oh, he really just said pull up the code."
Well, I know how to look at it.
HTML, and you were right. We were sitting there looking. It was just like, "Oh, there it is. Boom." We fixed it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I still know how to look at code and know what I'm looking at, but I don't write it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I guess on that note, we're pretty much to the end of the show, Nash. But I guess I'll ask you one post-topic question since there's 8 minutes. So if you could go back to when you first came into working with data, what is the number one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
I think I wish I would have learned Python way back when, way before it became kind of like the language of choice. It's just so extensible. You can do so much with it. I think that would have been, super beneficial, put me ahead a lot. Also, a lot of stuff was still on premise when I was first coming up. So kind of getting on the cloud, right out of the gate. If I knew what I know now and I went back then, I'd put stock into, a ton of companies like Snowflake and things like that. And hopefully, wouldn't have to work anymore. And I would just ride my shares into the sunset. But then even outside of data, when I was in school, a lot of my curriculum was C#. So it was very like software engineering heavy. And sometimes I think about what if I would have went, more that route and just gotten really good at actually building apps, and, could have been one of these guys you see, building apps like Snapchat and Bumble and things like that. And, they just take off and they become, super, super wealthy because they could do a little bit of that kind of coding. But my brain never worked that way. I was always much more of like a SQL guy. SQL made a lot more sense to me. But ultimately, yeah, it was just learning more things. It's continuous learning now. Like I said earlier, technology evolves so quickly and there's always something new to learn. It's just trying to find time to actually have a day job, have a family, and then also try to sit back down and read and learn and do things like that. Just never enough time in a day.
That's true. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, AI probably would have taken your job anyway if you would have just become a programmer, but I'm just kidding.
Yeah. See if you can find me like 5 years from now. And if I'm not destitute somewhere, maybe AI is faded. So
maybe.
Yeah.
Well, in closing, Nash, would you like to tell listeners how they could find you?
Yeah, I'm one of those anti-social media guys, but I am on LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me, add me on LinkedIn, and let's have a chat about data. If you need data help, please reach out. More than happy to get you hooked into BJSS and myself, and let you pick my brain at the very least. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on here today and giving me a chance to kind of talk about data and AI and the ever evolving landscape. It's not going anywhere. Everything is data, as I tell people. There's every single thing you do all day long creates data, and so someone needs to be able to gather that data and clean it up for you, and give you some ways to make decisions based on it. So we're here to stay.
Awesome. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Nash, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I'll let Jesse close us out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Nash. And in closing, per usual, audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. So build authentic connections with your audience and drive more engagement. So you can use AI. We've been talking a lot about AI this episode, but think of using AI to craft your audiences for your marketing and actually have your message hit with the right people at the right time and have it resonate with your brand, ensuring your marketing hits the mark. Sorry, not the effort, but you'll have the efforts hit the mark every time. But we want to bring you closer to your marketing goals. So think about using AI for your audience data and visit bdex.com and click on Talk to an Expert to get powered by BDEX. And I'll go ahead and put the QR code for those of you who are watching on video. You can scan that. That'll take you over to the BDEX website. But if you're on podcast, just simply go to bdex.com and click on Talk to an Expert so that you can get powered by BDEX. And also reach out to us at info@bdex.com and share your qualitative data with us, including if you know anyone who you think would be a great fit for the show. Send them along our way, and we'll continue to work on making this show better for you. And thanks again to our audience and also to our guest, Nash, for coming on last minute. Nash, we really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see everyone next week.